Okay. So I'm Lauren Buchan.
I'm Tashira Carnahan.
Yes.
I'm Cami Orton.
All right, so the first question um, talked about what threats to children and families did Elder Holland mention? How has Babylon influenced how has Babylon influenced the development of the threat to children and families that have chosen to address that you have chosen to address?
Well, the threat I chose was domestic violence. Um, and I think that kind of goes along with child abuse as well as neglect. And the third example that Elder Holland talked about, the police officer that went and found all the children.
Finally.
Um,
Hey.
I think that's definitely a threat that Elder Holland mentioned.
Yeah, the threat that I chose was pornography, and the world has influenced the development of it by making it so common and mainstream in our life. We see it everywhere. We see it in commercials, not just in movies anymore. We see it um, all over the internet and ads, and the world has made it so that if you don't see it, it seems very uncommon. It's very common to see it, so that it's kind of a big deal if you don't anymore. So I think that that's a huge thing that's an issue today.
So are we just sharing our threats right now? Sorry, I'm late, guys.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So for my threat, I chose single parenthood. Like more specifically, like yeah, basically just single parenthood and how it can affect the overall development of a child. And so I guess the world makes it seem like it's something that's normal, and that like, oh, too bad it's happening to you. So, but you could still make it. So that's what I'm doing for my threat.
For mine, when I wrote this, I wrote just irresponsible adults that don't really, I don't know, they aren't putting their children first. I was going off of the example he wrote about the police officer, and just I feel like that happens a lot. We see a lot of that on the news and stuff like that. I just think that people are having children irresponsibly, and then they're not taking care of.
Another thing I thought of, just kind of more generally rather than a specific threat, but you know the example that Elder Holland talked about, the basketball player who transferred schools, and then when he came back to play in Salt Lake, how the fans were just really horrible to him. Um, just that attitude of, like Elder Holland said, checking your religion at the door. I don't know. I think that can be a threat that I'm trying to explain. I don't know that the way that people have attitudes towards maybe how people have attitudes towards things that are a threat to the family. That well, like we need to have equality or whatever. So it's not about religion, but I don't know if that makes sense. What I'm trying to say.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I put, just as the threat, I put sports as one. Because, and what you're saying is right, it's the attitude that you carry, but I think that sports kind of channels that attitude. People just think, well, it's just a game, I can act however I want, and then once the game is over, then I'll go back to how I should act. And so I think sports, that competitive edge, kind of gets people into this fiery mode. So yeah, I think sports in and of itself, if used for that purpose, can be a threat. If it's not used for good, it's ultimately going to lead to fighting and unkindness.
Even in the webcast, it talks about um, how you want to injure people, kind of, you know?
Yes.
So, like,
Yeah.
he and the audience just said that they wanted to hurt someone, and he said he didn't even plan that. How it is like a, I guess not really a desire, but just like something they want to do when you're not getting
The
what you
natural
want.
man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. I thought another threat was not judging righteous judgments. Just because if you're not making judgments for your children, like the Elder Holland was saying, how if you don't make the right judgments on when your kids should come home for curfew, or the kind of people they hang out with, or the things they're involved with, that can be a threat to children and families, because if you're not making righteous judgments for your kids and your family, you could your kids could be doing whatever they want, and you don't even care. You're not even aware.
Yeah, I also wrote that when we're not standing as a witness of God at all times and all things in all places, that that can just be really dangerous also. Just because if we're only living a Christ-like life on Sunday, then I think children will get confused, and they'll feel like we're really fake individuals, and they just won't want to listen to us because we're not genuine. And so I think that's also something that can be a threat.
What's going on with that? You know that one story talks about the woman that has like rainbow colored hair and tattoos or whatever, and he talks about how it could be just someone that temporarily fallen away, or they've come back, um or just whatever. But he said that we shouldn't judge on appearance or anything like that, because we got to remember she is a daughter of God. She's loved as much as you're loved in the eyes of the Lord. So I feel like that's a thread, just how we initially judge each other.
Yeah, I agree.
Shall we go on to the next question?
Yeah.
All right, the next one says, how does Elder Holland's description of Babylon and Israel coincide with defending the doctrine of the family in these latter days?
Well, he first started to explain how back in the scriptural times, when the Zion area that they were living in would be threatened by Babylon, Israel would leave every time to establish Zion somewhere else. But he says now is the time where we have to stand and create Zion wherever we live, no matter the threats around us and no matter how Babylonish it's going to get. And so I think that this coincides with defending the doctrine of the family, because we have threats to it all around us, and if we don't stand up for it where we live and right now, I mean, there's not going to be anybody to stand up for it. If we just constantly leave and run away from the threat to establish it somewhere else, we can't do that now.
Yeah, it was like, wasn't it in his talk that he shared that poem that someone wrote about World War II, that like they came for the Jews and I didn't speak up, or no, they came for the communists and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a communist. They came for the Jews and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Jew, and so on and so forth. And then they came for the Protestants or whatever it was, the rest of us, and there was no one left to speak up.
I don't know if he shared it in that talk, but I've heard that somewhere. He
Okay,
might have
maybe
shared it in a different talk.
It might have been something else I was reading. I feel like all my readings are about the same thing, so I can't
Yeah.
remember which class it's for.
Yeah, no, but that is perfect because it's true. That totally is exactly what is happening today. If we're not the one standing up, who is going to be the one to stand up? But I thought it was interesting that he talked about how we need to reflect our religious beliefs and our gospel commitments by making situations better and not worse. And that also coincides with defending the doctrine of the family, because if we're not respectful and we're not showing love and compassion in our arguments for standing up for the family, and just kind of letting, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. No, so if we're not reflecting our religious beliefs and our gospel commitments and showing that love and compassion, then people aren't going to listen to us. They're not going to want to even hear what we have to say. They're going to call us bigots. They're going to call us, haters, and you don't have tolerance and all of that, every possible argument against us because we're not showing love and compassion. So I think that's really important. That was an important thing that he said for us to show. Just because I think it shows respect, and most people respond to respect well. Other people who are, they don't really care what we have to say, even if we're respectful, they won't be respectful back. But most people respond to respect well.
Yeah, there's a class a couple of semesters ago that talked about how the church never retaliates. Like they'll answer a question, but they won't act like they're angry or hateful, because that's not what we're supposed to do. If we say, oh no, this is not what we believe, but we believe this, and this is why, it's more acceptable than saying, hey, you were living the wrong way.
I think a difference is promoting your own beliefs versus tearing down someone else's beliefs. And I think it's great and it's fine and good to say, well, this is what I believe about this issue, without saying, I believe you're wrong or you're bad or you're whatever, but just, I don't know, I think that's a lot more positive.
I think oftentimes when it comes to defending our beliefs and stuff, I know that I am sometimes, that we fear the judgment of others, and that's what can influence whether or not we defend something. And so I think after reading Elder Holland's talk, I thought to myself, I'm in order to be more like Christ and to be the example that he is, we need to be more afraid of God's judgment rather than men's judgment. And when we do that, then it will allow us to defend what we need to in the most positive and effective way.
Yeah, I just had an experience just now before this video. I posted an article on Facebook about just how it was a cool article. I thought it was awesome. It was about this gay man saying that he opposed same-sex marriage because he thinks that a child's entitled to having a mom and a dad. And so I posted the article and I said, awesome article. I totally advocate for the family. That's the best environment for children to be raised in. And then someone I went to EFY with a few years back, he always comments on all of my things whenever I post things like that. He's always trying to start a fight. He's so politically minded, and I don't know what his issue is, but he always tries to start a fight. And so this is what he commented. He says, he's quoting part of the article, and every child needs a mom and a dad, period. I could never forgive myself for ripping a child away from his mother so I could selfishly live out my dreams. And then he says, what about single fathers and mothers? And when a child is put up for adoption, you are hardly ripping a child away from anyone. And I was like, all right. This guy is trying to start a fight. This guy is trying to bring up points that okay, how is single fathers and mothers and children putting up for an adoption in the same pool as same-sex marriage? It shouldn't be, because single fathers and mothers, those children should be entitled to having their father and their mother. Those situations are hard, and I'm not going to deny that. But I still think that the child is entitled to both of their parents. I don't think that single fathers and mothers, I don't think that's a good environment for a child. That's not what I'm saying. But he's trying to put it in a light that is just completely different from what I'm trying to advocate for. And so whenever I comment back on him, I'm always trying to think, okay, I can't just ignore it, because that would be being afraid of him more than God, and God wants me to defend this. So what can I say in a kind and compassionate way that will get my point across, that will let him know that I'm not trying to, you know, put him down or anything, but I'm trying to tell him that, what you're thinking is not what I believe. So it's kind of a fine line, but I appreciate the comment you made about being more afraid of God's judgment than man's, because that is what we should be fearing more. God is the one that's going to let us into his kingdom in the end, not men. So,
Yeah, I've heard that argument as well. I think I can't remember. Anyways, it's sometime this week. And I think one of the differences is when you advocate for children to go to a same-sex family, you're actively putting a child in an environment without a father and mother. No one plans to have a child and get divorced or have a spouse die, or
right.
That's not something that you're trying to do. But in a same-sex marriage environment, you're actively, that there will not be a father and a mother involved, and I think that's the difference, to me at least.
No, that's a good point. But then there's also the issue of those who, because we advocate for people who are married to have kids. But then I can totally see him bringing up the point, well, what about those who cohabitate, who are together, who have kids? That's their mom and their dad living together, but they're not committed because they're not married. But people have different definitions of commitment. They don't think that marriage is now what you need to have in order to be committed to each other. So it's a very hard, fine line for people to see. It's not a hard, fine line for me to see. It's very clear. But to everybody else, I feel like they just don't really care. And this person that I went to EFY with, he's a member of the church and everything, but he just likes to play devil's advocate and likes to, I'm not sure what he tries to do, but he's not quite there. He doesn't quite, he doesn't understand the doctrine of the family. That's what it comes down to.
I have a lot of friends too that are like that like to play devil's advocate. And something that I just thought of right now is like, I think that sometimes we may need to stay clear away from those type of people, because they could influence, like maybe not like all at once, but like very little over time. Their like comments and their like opposing viewpoints and whatnot can influence us to kind of from what we believe in. So
It's
like,
true.
yeah.
Yes.
So, my one friend, I don't want to talk to her anymore because she's taking that road of always playing devil's advocate. So I don't want that to influence my own beliefs.
I think that's true. Just because a few years ago, when I wasn't even in college, I would post things like that, and this person would comment on it. And some of his comments, I would read them and be like, oh, that's a good point. I would think that for like a couple of seconds, and then be like, whoa, no, that's not a good point at all. Like, why am I even thinking that? But it's true. It really does. If you're not careful, those kind of people can influence what you think. And so it's good choice to pick who your friends are and who you hang out with.
Well, moving on to the next question about what characters and attributes Elder Holland talked about that can make us more effective family advocates. One of the things that really stood out to me is how when he said we do not dumb down our doctrine for anything. I guess that's not really characteristic, but maybe that attitude of, God has established laws and that's how it is, and we aren't going to change those because of what somebody else thinks or what somebody else wants.
All I could see was Brother Rarick's commentary when I read that part of the talk. I could just. Did you guys watch that video? Brother Rarick's.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he repeated it
I
like
can't hear
3
you.
times. I can't hear you, Elder
Yeah,
Holland.
I can't hear you. Elder Holland, what'd you say? Yeah, that's all I could see when I read that part in the talk. But no, yeah, I understand what you're trying to say. The attitude of just keeping up with the doctrine and understanding that what's there is there and it's not going to change, and to just continue living it righteously. I think another thing that he said, again, on the showing love and compassion and respect, because if we're going to be living our religion, that's what we need to show. I loved the examples that Elder Holland said about how Christ judged righteously, where in some instances he would show love and compassion, in other instances he kicked people out of the temple, and he was, he showed, I wouldn't say anger, but I would say he showed disappointment in a more opened way. He was disappointed that the people were defiling the temple. I don't know. I can't bring myself to say it was anger. I mean, he was angry that they were disrespecting God, but it's hard for me to say that he was angry, because I don't think that's a. I don't know. Maybe it was anger, because in the scriptures we hear God's wrath. His anger was kindled, but it's hard for me to bring myself to say that Christ was angry. I guess when he brings in God and God is involved, then yeah, he's angry at people blaspheming him. But I don't know. I think that those examples were important to know, because in some instances we need to show love and compassion. In other instances we need to be more bold and tell people that they're wrong. So it just depends on the situation and the person and what you're talking about.
For that one, I kind of was thinking that when we check our religion at the door, we can't really have the Holy Ghost with us. And so, in order to be effective family advocates, I think we have to make sure to keep our religion with us when we're advocating, and make sure that we have the gift of the Holy Ghost with us, because then we can be more effective. Whereas if we don't, then we're just going off of our knowledge, which without the Holy Ghost, I don't think our knowledge usually is very strong. And it goes back to stand as a witness also. We can't advocate if we ourselves aren't being good family members and being good wives and mothers and things like that.
One thing I liked was, well, two things. So when he said tolerate to be in Babylon, but not of it, it just reminded me of that one quote where it's like, you can be in the world, but not of the world. So it's important to connect with people, but it doesn't mean we have to follow what they do. And then I also like near the end where he's talking about how when he meets Heavenly Father Christ, where he's like, I want them to recognize me from my life and not by my title. So it's important to live righteously and do as much as you can, and this like advocating for the family instead of just saying like one of those I guess kind of prideful or cocky people like, oh, I'm an educator for family and I know what I'm doing. I need you guys to do this, but that's not the point. The point is sharing what you believe in and hoping others feel the same way.
You
Did
guys
anyone
follow
else?
my answer, so.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. Yeah, but I agree with what you guys are saying. A specific example that I was thinking about was one of my friends. He came out to me like a while ago, and we were talking about well, I was telling him about my beliefs and stuff, and I think it was somewhere along the talk. I don't remember what specifically it said, but it said like, well, it goes along with the whole compassion thing, and also, yeah, it goes along with the compassion thing and being more like Christ when it comes to advocating uh, issues. So I told him, I love you. I just don't accept what you are doing, but I love you nonetheless. So that's really important when it comes to dealing with people.
Yeah, and that moves right into the other question about the other video in the restaurant.
Mhm.
Like, a lot of people just expressed that you have to show love regardless of actions or behavior. You can always love someone just like you love everybody, because no one in your family or none of your friends are perfect. Everybody makes mistakes, but you love them regardless.
What I found interesting was that that one man who suggested the 12-step program specifically for same-sex attraction, in the video it was shown as such a negative thing. It was shown as, you're trying to change this person, you're not accepting them for who you are. In that instance, I think that the man was trying to do good in sharing a resource, but I think he was sharing it in the wrong way. He wanted the person to be changed instead of him changing for himself and him wanting to change so that he could be closer to God and make the right decisions. He was just making assumptions that, kind of like, oh, if he's not changed, if he's not fixed, he's going to be damned kind of a mentality. And so I think that the old man was, I don't think he was necessarily wrong in sharing a resource. I just think that in the way he shared it, it was wrong. I probably would have shared the resource if I had known about that. I haven't even heard of that. But in the video, it made it seem like to change a person that is that way is wrong. We should just accept them for who they are. And yes, we should accept them and we should love them, but if there are resources out there that they would like to take and they would like to have and go through, then I think that that is a great option. I think that's great to share, but it's ultimately up to them. I just think that the video made it sound like that old man was so bad and so wrong for even thinking that the guy should be changed, thinking that his same-sex attraction could be fixed or that it needed to. I think that the video was kind of had its own agenda in that way.
Going along with the comment, I think another going along also with the question, an obligation that we have is becoming and being informed, so that way we are able to help others in situations such as that one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's something I wrote down. We should be at our best so we can help them be at their best. So, yeah, I felt the same way, like the 12-step process, when you offered it, it seemed like it was in a negative way, which I could see it not being negative, but but to others it could be negative. And all the advice felt like, in general, I felt all the advice was kind of negative, saying that, well, not the ones going against him being gay, and the ones that are being supportive with the correct way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think it's because the way they said that they were against it was they weren't showing love. If they had said, "Oh, you need to accept him and love him for the way you are," there are resources that can help you through this, can help him through this too. I think that would have been in a more positive light, but because of the way they said their views of against it, it was in a negative light. It wasn't a positive thing. It was like, this is horrible and wrong and you need to change, instead of being loving. So,
One thing that kind of bothered me about that video is, and maybe this was just me, you guys will have to tell me what you think, the way that they talked about acceptance. And I think maybe it just depends on your definition of acceptance. But I heard a lot, you just need to accept him, you just need to accept him, you need to accept that that's how he is. And I think if you, I don't know, accepting that someone is making mistakes, but you love them regardless, I think that's good. But accepting them as in that's just how it is, no big deal, it's fine, that's not right either.
it's not right. And I think that's why, I don't know. I really think the video had an agenda by kind of explaining that we need to accept people that way. That is just how it is. We can't change them. There's nothing you can do, when in reality there is. And so I think that the video was shown to kind of get us to think, like, what would we have done in that situation? Would we have been like the other people in that situation and say, you just need to love and accept him, and we know people who are gay and we've come to accept them who they are, and yeah, we may not like how he's acting, but we still love him. I mean, yeah, we are supposed to love the sinner but hate the sin, but we also need to stand up for what's right too. Even if it is, to the person who we love, we need to tell them that what they're doing is wrong. I thought that the dad had, well, it was a setup. It was a whole setup, but I think that, I mean, his comments were really harsh, and his comments were, like, unbelievable almost. Like, how could you be so, like, hateful?
Hateful.
Yeah, how could you be so hateful to your own son? Like, you've loved him up until now? Like, you've loved him, and now all of a sudden it's okay to hate him now? It just didn't make sense. It didn't fit with what a parent should do. And so I think that's why everybody was kind of like, whoa, what's going on? But I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of
Oh wait, no, you can all talk after.
I kind of got, I don't know, I think the main thing I got from the video, like Tashara said, was just that, or Tashara, I mean, um, is that what would I do in that situation? And I think personally, I probably wouldn't generally do anything, because that's kind of my personality, just to be like, oh wow, he's really upset, I don't know what to do, I'll just ignore him or whatever. But I think the whole point is that Elder Holland gave, and the point of the video was that I think we do kind of have an obligation to, I don't know, make things better. And I think the people in the restaurant were trying to make things better, but we have to be careful between, like, tolerating and accepting, or just, like, I don't know, make sure that people understand what our stance is, and that we aren't advocates for gay marriage or things like that, but that we should be more loving and kind when people maybe tell us those things. But I don't know. I think that would be a really hard situation and really awkward. I think I would have a hard time if I was actually in that situation.
I think what would make it really hard to like intervene and say something is just the fact that it's a family. It's between family members. Like, you don't want to like come off as disrespectful by like making it seem that you're eavesdropping and stuff. So I think that's another factor that would make it really difficult for me, and I guess for other people to stand up and say something.
Yeah, I could see that situation getting heated really fast if I was there and said something, and then the person being like, why are you listening in? This is just between me and my son. I could be like, well, you were talking loud enough for me to hear, so I don't know. I don't know. At times I'm glad I'm not in those kind of situations, but at the same time I'm like, man, I want to say something so bad, so I don't know. There's a fine line to not cross.
I'm on a meeting.
But
That's all the questions, wasn't it? I think.
yeah,
Yeah.
the final one we didn't really ask, but we talked about it. So
Oh yeah. We kind of combined the last two together.
yeah.
All right. Did anyone else have any other input before I summarize?
Nope, that's about it.
Okay. All right. So we talked about the first question and the different threats, and we talked about domestic violence and the police officer finding the children. We talked about pornography, how it's become more uncommon not to see it than to see it. We also talked about how parents are being irresponsible as a threat and not really taking care of their children. We also talked about the basketball player and the fans being rude and how we shouldn't be checking our religion at the door. We also talked about standing in holy places and judging others. Then for the second question, we talked about every time they would try to move Israel to keep Zion in order, but we need to stand and plant our feet. And if we're not standing up, who's going to stand up? Then we needed to reflect our religious beliefs and commitments. And if we're not respectful and show that we care when we're defending the family, that it's not going to come out the right way. And then we need to also promote our beliefs without tearing down another's beliefs. And then in order to be more like Christ, we need to be more afraid of God's judgment than man's judgment. We need to show kindness and compassion to those that are arguing against us. And then we also talked about how no one plans to get divorced or have a spouse pass away, but it is a plan when you're going with same-sex marriage. It's kind of hard for people to see the difference between marriage and cohabitation nowadays because it seems like it's still a commitment. And then sometimes it's good to steer away from those that play the devil's advocate. Then we talked about how when we check our religion at the door, we can have the Holy Ghost. And when we're advocating for the family, we should strive to have the Holy Ghost with us so that we can appropriately share our knowledge. And then we talked about how we should be in the world but not of the world. And we need to be more like Christ when we're advocating. We don't have to accept what they're doing, but we still need to love them. And then we talked about the video clip in the restaurant and how the 12-step process kind of came off in a negative way. And we talked about how it's important how you share the information, and it could be perceived as negative or positive. We need to be informed so that we can help others. And there's a difference between accepting mistakes and accepting how this is how it is thought process. And then we talked about how the video clip kind of seemed like it had its own agenda. And again, we talked about how we should love the sinner but not the sin. And then we kind of talked about how what we would do in that situation. And the point is that we have an obligation to make things better. And that's it. Does anyone else have any other things I missed?
Perfect. I think that was it.
All right, I'm going to end